Now.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is Micah Hanks. Pardon my tongue tied up right there for a minute. He's been a past guest of mine several times. It's always a pleasure to have him. He's the host of the Grelian Report, so me and him are both paranormal radio talk show hosts, but he's one up on me in as much as he's also an author, and he also speaks at many conferences all over the place, and he's really getting a lot of good information out there about spirituality and about UFOs and nanotechnology and the connection between science and the UFO, and really, in all honesty, from what I can tell, although not stated directly, a connection in there between UFO and spirituality to some degree. Like they may have some knowledge of how it works, not to mention the between science and spirituality, but we can touch bases on that, even though it's not directly mentioned in the book, but it's just something I kind of got the impression while I was reading it. But at any rate, the man's a very active man. He does a lot in the community to help people learn. He's good on sharing information, and he's a really open-minded person. And I really enjoy having him. I really think the world's a lot better place to have him in it. And if you want to learn more about him, you can go to www.grelianreport.com. And he's got his books listed right there on the page with him, and any upcoming events like conferences and whatever he's got going on. Also, if you want to call in and ask questions, the number is 832-632-7904. And in addition to that, if you want to come join us in chat, it's www.paranormalpalace.com. And Micah, let's start out with how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing very good. You know, Royce, it's always good to be on the program. The weather's warming up fairly nicely here in Asheville, North Carolina for February, and so, you know, I'm able to run around without having to wear scarves and gloves every day. You know,
that's very important. During this winter, we just spent like $400 a month just to heat the house.
Oh, tell me about it. Now, you know, you're further south than I am, aren't you?
Yes, sir. I'm right along the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, wow, I tell you, you know, that's incredible. And we're blessed because we're not in New York. And so, you know, I hope the folks who are really getting it hard up there in New York and the Northeast, I hope that they're all doing well. And we send out good thoughts and well wishes to all of them who are enduring that winter deluge up there right now.
Yeah, we want to keep those people in mind. Poor folks are getting a bum deal because everybody else is clearing up.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes, huh?
Well, it seems like somebody ends up getting it somewhere down the line. Somewhere it's never good. Seems to be perfect in every section of the globe.
Exactly, that's the thing. And, you know, I try not to be an advocate too much of the conspiracy theories that, you know, our weather is entirely controlled. But yeah, exactly. I don't mean, pardon the pun, I don't mean to harp on that kind of a thing. But, you know, that's kind of you know, something we do have to take into consideration these days is that certain aspects of the weather, maybe not on a global scale, but at very least, you know, in terms of, you know, certain particular climates and demographic regions, if you will, you know, I think that weather can be controlled and manipulated to a point. And what's fascinating about that, and I guess it's a good precursor to the conversation we're going to have about the UFO singularity, is that I would argue there are probably a lot of different kinds of technologies out there that most people are not aware of, and they are kept clandestine for various reasons. And in other instances, there very well may also be things that are going on that are well outside the scope of human perception altogether. And, you know, the determinant factors behind what actually causes these sorts of things, whether it be anything from weather manipulation, in a sense, to, you know, more esoteric things like what UFOs may be. And as you'd said, whether there's a spiritual connection between UFOs and all this, and maybe how they relate to us. I think that there are so many more questions than people really know where to begin to even look for. And we say we're all looking for answers, but I think that, again, you know, we should probably be looking for new questions because that might lead us to new ways of thinking about things. So whether it be radio or weather or UFOs, it'll make for good radio discussion, I think.
I would tend to agree with you, and I think these questions that you raised in this book, I think they should be raised in any group that's investigating any area of the paranormal. I mean, because to fail to do so, it's like making spaghetti without putting tomato sauce or hamburger in it.
That's a good analogy for it. And I'll tell you this, it's funny because one of the things I like about coming on your show, Royce, is that, it's a little more down home. I'm a Southern boy. They know me as the mouth of the South, and it's always fun to be able to kind of wax poetic and talk about the heady stuff, but also kind of bring it back down to earth in a sense. I love to cook. I'm a chef, and I think that I'm just as esoteric with my not just cooking, but just in general, my appetites for different kinds of foods and things like that, as I am with regard to the kinds of things I'm interested in. So I can always appreciate a good cooking or culinary reference thrown in.
I do that all the time. I've been a cook for like 40 years, and I just kind of it seems to come natural. You've been dealing with food so many times, you see a correlation, in other words.
There are correlations in all things, as you'll soon find. And I'm still very, very desirous of being able to try some of your barbecue one day. I always hear about these fascinating, sometimes several days' worth of undertakings. Crafting a fine barbecue is a science unto itself. So one of these days, maybe. One of these days.
I passed that one on to my son after I found out about the emphysema, but he's been trained by me, so it's still probably worthwhile.
There you go. That's right.
At any rate, while we're here, before we get too far involved, John, why don't you go ahead and say hello real quick? Let's let everybody know that you're out there, and because I really appreciate the help that you and Gerald give me.
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
And Gerald, how about you? Want to give everybody a quick hello?
I'm here as well, and once again, it's always good to co-host with you, Royce, and John. I enjoy it. And it sounds like we're having a really good show so far.
Gerald's going to get him a black hat so we and him can take a picture, because he's going by the outlaw Gerald Riggins now, and I'm been the Redneck Radio Man. We get a picture of us side by side, the Redneck Radio Man, Royce Solomon with the outlaw Gerald Riggins, your host and co-host type thing.
That's just trouble now, because now you add the mouth of the South to the mix, and it's going to be a bunch.
Well, I got to tell you, I took the liberty to get some questions out of this book while I was reading it, the things that kind of come to my attention, which usually do, because I'm a very inquisitive person. One of the things I was noticing is you mentioned early on in your book about all the evidence that's been coming from the government, because lately they've been declassifying files, and they're being government's being accused of cover-ups the whole time they're declassifying files. And I thought we'd touch on bases on that, because one of the things that occurred to me, do we have a way of knowing that the files that they're releasing are legitimate, dependable files, or not something that's been cooked up to mislead ufology astray?
Yeah, that's a deep subject, and we could go in a lot of different directions there. I'll paraphrase first something that was mentioned by Colonel John Alexander. Alexander, I met him briefly back in the latter part of this past year. And he's a bit of a controversial character, because he's one of these gentlemen who actually was involved in different government projects and operations. And he's also a person who goes out there and tells you that there are no secrets, that the disclosure that everyone's harping on is actually a slow release, if you will, kind of like those gel caps that you take, if you got a headache, slow release gels. UFO disclosure could be compared to that in the sense that there is some information that I think that is being kept by governments, and people say, we want disclosure, we want the truth. But really, bits and pieces of the truth have been coming out, not just through the U.S. government, but through a lot of different governmental agencies all around the world, and for quite some time. But people naturally are going to look with suspicion at anyone who has former background in U.S. intelligence, like Colonel John Alexander. They're going to look at someone like him, and they're going to say, this guy, he worked in government, he's interested in UFOs, and he's also saying that, and really, again, to get back to the paraphrasing that I was going to bring into the question here, John Alexander would put it to you thusly: the government doesn't care. They're not interested. They don't care about UFOs like everyone supposes that they do. And so naturally, we look at someone like that and we say, this guy could be misinfo, disinfo, whatever. This guy's lying to people. This guy's creating a culture of secrecy and proclaiming to be the mouthpiece of, an individual who had firsthand experience and who's going out there and trying to mislead us into believing that government doesn't have information on UFOs. We all know that's bunk. Well, I'm not so sure. I would have to say that really, I think to an extent, John is probably right on point. First of all, if we're to take his word at face value, this is a man who does have experience in the upper echelons of government. This is a man who has taken a very extensive interest in UFOs and has written, books on this subject and given many lectures. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is that, if we take his word on this, he draws from that experience and puts that forth to create, a dialogue about UFOs from a civilian standpoint that government doesn't really care, and that civilian researchers, in essence, might do better at trying to understand the mystery than government does. Now, what's interesting about that is there was an episode, I think, in late last year on the popular Paracast program, and Gene Steinberg and Chris O'Brien had John Alexander and Stanton Friedman on the program together and allowed them to have a debate. Now, although John comes from a background in government, and he says, government isn't all that interested in UFOs, and the reason why is because it really goes all the way back to the 1960s, and basically the scientific and academic dismissal of the UFO subject in various avenues, and thereby government agencies kind of withdrew and kind of washed their hands of a situation that they felt, according to intelligence reports and documented data at the time, was not a phenomenon that directly concerned the American public or military agencies. And the reason being,
it was not a productive pursuit.
It was not a productive pursuit because, they didn't think, obviously, that there was any kind of an obvious danger. But for a couple of decades there was always that potential. And with a new phenomenon like UFOs, they took it very seriously. And then after 2 decades of realizing that these things are going to buzz our nuclear sites from time to time and every now and then show up, over Washington, D.C., but there's never going to be any kind of weaponization or anything like that, no potential threat or danger involved, government agencies seem to back off of it. Now, Stanton Friedman counters Alexander and says, by the same token, there's also a lot of information that, FOIA requests and things like that, Freedom of Information Act, have managed to obtain that shows that there have been secret elements and that often a lot of the quote-unquote files, and disclosed information that they put forth, contains redacted, and Stanton just bemoans the fact that literally many of the pages have about a sentence available, and then the rest of the entire page is blacked out or redacted. And so it's kind of a two-edged sword. Yes, I think that John Alexander's right. There's a lot less secrecy in government than people realize. But then on the other end of that sword, there are aspects of secrecy that I think that maybe certain government agencies don't know about, and that sounds absurd to people, but the point here is that if you read Patrick Moynihan's book, Secrecy, it talks about how intelligence reports, especially back during the Cold War, were literally within the United States government. Separate agencies were so poor at communicating certain things to one another that it led to and fueled the perception here in the U.S. that the Soviets may have still had weapons of mass destruction and an actual ability to be able to attack and destroy the United States. And so the Cold War, they say, if intelligence services had communicated more effectively in the West, the Cold War could have ended much sooner. I think that in the UFO equation, the same sort of thing happens. And that although there's definitely that covert aspect to it, I think that there's always that mystique about what the public doesn't know, and we always assume, okay, then if we don't know, we have to presume that there's a lot more than what we think is going on actually happening. Maybe that's not the case.
Well, maybe it isn't, but I got to tell you, and before I do, have you actually spent time in the service yourself?
I haven't. I have many friends who have. I have not, and I've had a lot of them come to me and share their UFO experiences as well. Well,
if you talk to your friends, I bet what you'll find out that just about every one of them, if not everyone, will probably tell you is that it doesn't matter if you're a colonel, a general, or a private first class, you're just coming out of boot camp, you ain't been in the service a year. One of the first things that people learn about the military and its counterpart, the government, is if it's not of a danger to the U.S., if it's not of a military gain of some sort, a defense gain of some sort, they really have little time to care about anything other than their little personal private world, which is their war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, if the UFOs wasn't proving anything at that, now that's not to say it couldn't have changed in time. There's been a lot of time between back then and now, but from back then, if they weren't finding much, then I would say there's probably a lot of truth in what he said.
Yeah, and that's the point I'd like to make is that, again, I think people assert that John Alexander is misinfo. He's trying to mislead the public just because he came from a background in intelligence. He's interested in UFOs, and he's claiming that there's nothing going on in government. Of course, Stanton Friedman and many others will will, refute those claims and say that's absolutely not the case. I think it's a mixture. And again, I think one of the better counterpoints that Stanton Friedman brought into that discussion was the fact that, he felt that John Alexander may have also not been in a position where he had a need to know, disposition. There may not have been, in terms of classification and clearances, any need for him to have access to information pertaining to UFOs without question.
And he'd have a valid point.
That's true, exactly, and that's so it's a double-edged sword. I think that while there is probably less secret or covert activity going on, coming back to your original question, there's probably less secret or covert governmental activity going on than people in the mainstream, in the civilian populace, especially those who do not have experience in the military, folks like me. I think that it's easy for people of this disposition to assume that the government just is going to hide things. I think that there's a lot less being hidden than people probably think, but by the same token that there are certainly also exceptions to that rule, and a lot of that has to do with jurisdictions and need to know, and various agencies that maybe are more suited for, or even if we wanted to go in the direction of like Majestic 12 and things like that, even designed for purposes of dealing directly with the UFO question, and those would have to be very highly secretive. And I doubt that kind of information is the information that's being released, as John Alexander says, is ongoing with this disclosure, of UFO information.
Well, I think also we got to give credit to people on Stanton Friedman's side that even if we disagree with them and we think they're mistaken about it, that these are people of high integrity that really do believe they're on the right track, and they're just their understanding, pardon me, of the understanding of the information is different than ours. It's a different understanding, different interpretation, if you wish, but it doesn't make them really any more right or wrong or, have any less integrity than you or me would have, in other words.
Yeah, precisely. That's the whole thing. And, that's what's also important about this is that I don't adhere personally to so much of the exopolitical angle of all this. I've met Stephen Bassett, and he's a wonderful guy. Never met Dr. Stephen Greer. I've attended his lectures before, and again, a lot of the exopolitical activists, the people who are out there just harping for disclosure, there is integrity to what they do, and in the past I've expressed a bit of disdain with the way specifically that Stephen Greer goes about it. I do feel there's a little bit of a cult of personality that surrounds that particular individual, but that doesn't make him a bad guy. That doesn't make him any less capable of having his worldview, which is supported by a lot of credible evidence and a lot of findings and research that he's conducted. So he should be commended for the work that he's done. I just disagree with that. And actually, now this is breaking away from the original question, but it's again, kind of in keeping with the premise I put forth in the UFO Singularity. There's merit to the exopolitical work because obviously there are elements and there are exceptions to the rule. I don't know that there's as much secrecy as people would like to think, but there is certainly secrecy, and there are certainly things that are kept from the public. Maybe the public has a right to know. In some instances, maybe that has more to do with national security, and those certain things should be kept from the civilian populace. Not in every instance. I just think that there are always exceptions to the rules. But by the same token, that the fundamental assertion that all of this secrecy is surrounding an extraterrestrial component, that is something that troubles me a bit, because I haven't seen personally, as a UFO researcher, and I like to consider myself someone who's pretty well versed in this subject matter, I haven't personally seen a lot of evidence, of direct evidence at least, of extraterrestrial visitation. That is always a possibility.
Which is something you go into in your book. That I did notice is you appear to or your opinion stems that these are either interdimensional beings or from our own very future, but they're more terrestrial. There's nothing extra. And this is an area that I think personally, at least in our past, there may have been extraterrestrial, but I couldn't swear about it being different now, and I couldn't swear I'll be right about the past. I mean, the evidence out there is really so inconclusive, in other words. But, I've noticed you do seem to be pretty sure about your position on this.
Well, I think any good writer would want to try and come across as sounding like they're sure about what they're writing about. One of the worst criticisms I've seen of writers in this field is that they'll put forth information and they'll seem very detached from it, or they won't seem to want to commit to their idea. I can state with certainty that the UFO enigma is comprised of a number of different things, that many aspects of which are as yet misunderstood or completely, they probably literally go over our heads, not just by virtue of being able to fly through the air at incredible speed. I think that there are aspects of the UFO enigma that literally evade human perception on some levels. And so, yes, in the book, if I can be certain of one thing, it's that we can't assert that all UFO phenomenon has an extraterrestrial or an alien component underlying it. I think that that's always a possibility, but the kinds of things that we've definitely seen evidence for, and the only thing that I can say that scientifically that there is evidence for, incredible information to back up, is the fact that there are technologies on Earth that are capable of some of the things UFO craft are seen doing. But Royce, and this is something that fascinates me. I look to the future and to the technological trends of today with the UFO singularity in terms of trying to understand what may be going on, and a lot of people are probably thinking, well, if you don't have this technology already, what good is looking at the future of technology relative to humans going to do us in terms of understanding UFOs? But I think that with singularity, which is the primary subject in the book, technological singularity, the creation of intelligence that exceeds natural levels of human intelligence, I think that when we look at certain UFO phenomenon, you cannot deny that not only there are some aspects of the phenomenon that seem to evade what we should be capable of technologically ourselves today, but there's also that very fascinating component that seems to extend back into the past. And that's part of one of the reasons that, one of the subtitles of the book are why are past unexplained phenomena change in the future. In the past, there are some credible reports, like the fascist UFO files from prior to the Second World War that talked about the Italian government observing some of these, more conventional UFO type reports of today, saucers, cigar shapes, and things like that. Now, tell me who on Earth, who or what, could have had this kind of incredible technology prior to the Second World War. Knowing what we know about some of the Nazi UFO conspiracies and things, and I don't lend a whole lot of credibility to the idea that Hitler and the Nazis were literally building flying saucers. I'm sure that they were building some pretty incredible things and certainly had designs for planes that they probably couldn't afford by the time the Reich had fallen. But, the fact is that it would have been far more easy for me to digest the idea that some sort of a subversive new technology could appear following the Second World War. What do we do with these reports of UFOs prior to not only World War II, but World War I even? Some of the more credible airship reports going back to the late 1890s. There was something that was going on much, much earlier than the modern UFO era, and I think that all seems to point to something outside of what humans are capable of dealing with, and therefore UFO phenomenon at times could be a variety of technology that has exceeded natural levels of human intelligence already. That is essentially, in essence, why I tie in this technological singularity element, and that is also, in a nutshell, what the UFO singularity entails.
Yeah, now there's a big difference between singularity and technological singularity, and you're specifying the technological singularity, right?
I am, although, there's a number of other books out there that deal with, the singularity archetype, if you will. There's a book actually by, I own the book, and here I am, I'm blank trying to remember the author's name, but the book is called Event Horizon, and it deals with the singularity archetype. This is a common theme. If you look up, if you Google singularity can mean, I think, a oneness of soul, spirit, and body. It can mean, the transformational capacity of humans in terms of evolution and things like that. That gets a little closer to the concept of transhumanism, which I think would probably be, to try not to be long-winded about it, would entail human technologies that will help shape our evolutionary future. That's a very difficult and even controversial subject for many to deal with.
Yes, it is. You did deal with it in the book, however.
Certainly did. And I try to incorporate a little bit more of the esoteric, spiritual singularity into this equation, unlike many of the modern transhumanist or technological singularity advocates. But, yes, technological singularity is the primary crux here because, again, I think that Rich Dolan put it concisely when he said, what if when we're looking at UFOs, we're looking at some kind of a robotic intelligence? In other words, something that is a primarily artificial creation. If that's the case,
was that in his book, AD After Disclosure?
It may have been, actually. I think, actually, he had a great article there on his website that it was about the breakaway civilization concept, and then following Richard Dolan talking about a breakaway civilization. In other words, maybe perhaps an aspect of our current civilization that has utilized, if not an advanced technology that they created themselves, something that maybe incorporated reverse engineering of alien craft and things like that. However the technology was attained, if a small clandestine organization, or maybe not even a small one, maybe a wide-reaching, large, extra-governmental thing, I think is basically what Rich puts forth. If they attained such a technology that would be comparable to what we see in UFO reports, they could literally be capable of breaking away essentially from the known sphere of technology here present on planet Earth today. And so that's, I think, where Rich goes with some of his thoughts, and in a similar fashion, he has said at times, what if certain aspects of the UFO phenomenon weren't alien as we think it is, but could be representative of some kind of a robotic intelligence? Again, you see here that this, parts of humanity escaping from themselves, and literally, this is the essence of transhumanism. You pair that with the idea of certain UFO visitations, and I guess this would presume that there's an alien component, some technology emanating from elsewhere. But when Rich says we could be dealing with a robotic intelligence, for Pete's sake, people, I'm amazed that no one has looked at this transhumanist singularity UFO connection before. And it's really kind of sad that I'm the first guy who's written a book about that, which is, again, a little bit more of a philosophical perspective of it. Although I don't advocate ET intelligence is behind all UFO reports, there are several chapters in the book that do look at how what we would call post-singularity technologies not only might change ourselves, but if this has occurred elsewhere in the universe, how an alien intelligence might have utilized such complex advanced sciences to further their own ability to colonize and explore space. And there very well may be a possibility, Royce, that certain ET intelligences may exist out there that have utilized a technology that so far transcends the perceptual realm of humans that we may not even be capable of perceiving them. They could be standing in the room with you right there, and we wouldn't be fully aware of their presence.
Just out of phase of our dimension, pretty much. But, that was one of the things I meant to mention to you was, you got to ask yourself, especially for ancient reports of ET or UFOs, if you go and look, Wayne Herschel did a lot of work on this, and so did Gary Davids. You go look around the world, in the Hopi tribes, in Egypt, everywhere you go, they have these big monuments laid out like big star maps. And the funny thing is, instead of pointing at different constellations or being designed like different constellations, they all seem to be designed like Orion. And wouldn't that kind of make you wonder if maybe thousands of years ago we weren't getting visited from somewhere in Orion?
It's a possibility. So many people have pointed to that. I think that, the stars in Orion's belt, that's, if anything, with relation to extraterrestrial studies and cosmology, that's become kind of a meme unto itself. I believe, is Zeta 2 Reticuli not actually located in that constellation? I believe that it is.
I think it's located close to it in Pleiades or something.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And again, I don't profess to be an astronomer or an astrologer for that matter, but, whatever the case may be, again, that is a reference that's drawn directly, I guess, from the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, and there have been a few other kind of allocations of that meme within the abduction lore. Abduction, UFO abduction, alien abduction is not something, again, that I consider myself to be particularly an authority on. I do reference the work of some of the more famous abductees, including Travis Walton, Whitley Strieber in the book. And boy, you talk about interesting is when you're speculating about what this phenomenon may be, the UFO phenomenon. And I quote Whitley Strieber, who I think is probably one of the more eloquent writers on this subject. And I want to point out too, Whit's a guy who Whitley has never claimed that he was, I guess, he certainly has said that, it was an alien intelligence, but he never has said that without question that Whitley Strieber is an abductee of, has been a victim of, being taken by extraterrestrial alien beings. He has supposed that just along with everyone else, but he's also been very open-minded to other aspects of the phenomenon. And when the book came out, he had me on his program Dreamland, and it was so interesting to be able to talk with Whitley about that and to share, insight with someone who has claimed to have been right there. And he is, I think, just as passionate about the UFO subject as he is the abduction phenomenon, but I think he's also someone who realizes the necessity for maybe breaking the two apart and also thinking a little differently about what abduction may entail. It's really fascinating stuff. It really is, and there's so many different directions you can go with that. But anywho, again, I think that there's that transhuman connection that could probably be made with the abductees just as well. That's just a whole different discussion.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one, too. And I've had this discussion with John Biggerstaff and Nigel Connor, as have you. And you have to admit the UFO, and really, in all honesty, from what I can tell, although not stated directly, a connection in there between UFO and spirituality to some degree. Like they may have some knowledge of how it works, not to mention the between science and spirituality. But we can touch bases on that, even though it's not directly mentioned in the book, but it's just something I kind of got the impression while I was reading it. But at any rate, the man's a very active man. He does a lot in the community to help people learn. He's good on sharing information, and he's a really open-minded person. And I really enjoy having him. I really think the world's a lot better place to have him in it. And if you want to learn more about him, you can go to www.gralienreport.com. And he's got his books listed right there on the page with him, and any upcoming events like conferences and whatever he's got going on. Also, if you want to call in and ask questions, the number is 832-632-7904. And in addition to that, if you want to come join us in chat, it's www.paranormalpalace.com. And Micah, let's start out with how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing very good. You know, Royce, it's always good to be on the program. The weather's warming up fairly nicely here in Asheville, North Carolina for February, and so, you know, I'm able to run around without having to wear scarves and gloves every day. You know,
that's very important. During this winter, we just spent like $400 a month just to heat the house.
Oh, tell me about it. Now, you know, you're further south than I am, aren't you?
Yes, sir. I'm right along the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, wow, I tell you, you know, that's incredible. And we're blessed, because we're not in New York. And so, you know, I hope the folks who are really getting it hard up there in New York and the Northeast, I hope that they're all doing well. And we send out good thoughts and well wishes to all of them who are enduring that winter, deluge up there right now.
Yeah, we want to keep those people in mind. Poor folks are getting a bum deal because everybody else is clearing up.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes, huh?
Well, it seems like somebody ends up getting it somewhere down the line. Somewhere it's never good. Seems to be perfect in every section of the globe.
Exactly, that's the thing. And, you know, I try not to be an advocate too much of the conspiracy theories that, you know, our weather is entirely controlled. But yeah, exactly. I don't mean, pardon the pun, I don't mean to harp on that kind of a thing. But, you know, that's kind of you know, something we do have to take into consideration these days is that certain aspects of the weather, maybe not on a global scale, but at very least, you know, in terms of, you know, certain particular climates and demographic regions, if you will, you know, I think that weather can be controlled and manipulated to a point. And what's fascinating about that, and I guess it's a good precursor to the conversation we're going to have about the UFO singularity, is that I would argue there are probably a lot of different kinds of technologies out there that most people are not aware of, and they are kept clandestine for various reasons. And in other instances, there very well may also be things that are going on that are well outside the scope of human perception altogether. And, you know, the determinant factors behind what actually causes these sorts of things, whether it be anything from weather manipulation, in a sense, to, you know, more esoteric things like what UFOs may be. And as you'd said, whether there's a spiritual connection between UFOs and all this, and maybe how they relate to us. I think that there are so many more questions than people really know where to begin to even look for. And we say we're all looking for answers, but I think that, again, you know, we should probably be looking for new questions, because that might lead us to new ways of thinking about things. So whether it be radio or weather or UFOs, it'll make for good radio discussion, I think.
I would tend to agree with you, and I think these questions that you raised in this book, I think they should be raised in any group that's investigating any area of the paranormal. I mean, because to fail to do so, it's like making spaghetti without putting tomato sauce or hamburger in it.
You know, that's a good analogy for it. And I'll tell you this, it's funny because one of the things I like about
now.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is Micah Hanks, pardon my tongue-tied up right there for a minute. He's been a past guest of mine several times. It's always a pleasure to have him. He's the host of the Grelian Report, so me and him are both paranormal radio talk show hosts, but he's one up on me in as much as he's also an author, and he also speaks at many conferences all over the place, and he's really getting a lot of good information out there about spirituality and about UFOs and nanotechnology and the connection between science and